Welcome, everybody, to a Message to Lightworkers podcast, an interviewed series created for lightworkers to connect through our work and life path. Today, we have a very special guest, Danny Hidalgo, who's a very special friend to me. He has been my personal astrologer for the past 5 to 7 years now, and he has decided to come on and share his knowledge, his wisdom, and experience with all of us. If you're watching on our visual platform on YouTube, you will see the name Sue Hidalgo on the corner. His name is Danny. He is Sue's wife. And Sue was on our podcast just a few episodes ago talking about her psychic wisdom and sharing her story, which you can also find on our playlist. So make sure you go visit her podcast as well. So let's welcome Danny. Danny, welcome. Thank you for being with us today and sharing your story.
Glad to be with you all. Um, I'm taking advantage of this moment. Uh, I've been an astrologer for 46 years. My sun and moon are in the sign Pisces, ruled by Neptune. And right at this moment, within these hours, we say in astrology, transiting Neptune is conjuncting my sun at this moment. Coming into this time, I've been wondering, well, how much more Neptunian can I get or be or experience now that Neptune's on top of my sun versus this entire lifetime where I've totally surrendered to being Neptunian. And so I'm conscious. When I saw that Bri was doing these podcasts, I thought, well, here is something I can apply this time to, like to talk to you all about uh, metaphysical experiences such as astrology and the psychic world. In astrology, the implication is, the big story is that at the beginning of time, when our creator from the Big Bang created the universe, the expanding universe, and the Milky Way, and the solar system, and the planets in the solar system, and the specialness of humankind living on this planet, that the creator, if you will, or the creative intelligence at the beginning planned that every human being born on this planet would have a, a story written about their life that could be accessed. Now, how do we access this story? How do human beings access that story? Well, somewhere along the line between the Big Bang and now, somebody came up with this idea that the planets were symbolic in their as they were at the moment when you were born, when we were born. That creates at that moment a possible picture of how the planets look from the point on the planet that we're born at the moment we are born, looking east. That's the science part of it. From this, we could access information that concern that person's life. That there are no two people born at the same moment in the same place. So that every human being from the caveman to now has this, one can draw a birth chart for that person and look at it at the birth chart to see the storyline. So I made it my purpose in astrology to use my insight into reading these charts for people. And when I do, it's like I try to suggest, I make these stories up like before your soul left heaven or source or wherever the life energy accumulates, where when it's not um, living this life, when it's not incarnated. That uh, I say, let's pretend that the creator comes along and pinches a little bit of that light energy and says, poof, you're going to be George Washington. And I suggest that before the soul leaves source, I say, your soul goes to God's gift shop to choose what talents and what gifts you want to use in this lifetime. And so I pretend that there's that approach to the gift shop. You go in and you pick out these things. Oh, I want to be psychic. I want to be a double Pisces, Danny's soul said. So that's the gift I want. And the creator goes, sure, Danny, you got it. Sign here, kid. And in the fine print of all our gifts, of each one of our gifts and talents, in the fine print, there's always a catch-22. And the catch-22 for those of us who choose to be psychic is that we never know if what we're picking up is real or not. Well, how can we use this psychic stuff if we don't know about it? I've come to conclude that the imagination of all of us, we all have that gift of imagination. And for those of us who are Piscean, who are Neptunian, who seem to migrate their lives toward this metaphysical, psychic, spiritual approach to life, that we first use our imagination to get these gleanings, but what we have to develop over the lifetime is a faith in a belief in what our unconscious, subconscious promptings are somehow connected with source. That that's where these ideas originate from, and that through the imagination we can better access what those things are. So for most of us, like when I was a kid, it was well known that Danny had a big imagination. He makes up things. He might even not tell the truth because what he's saying doesn't equate with what's being experienced in the physical world. And let's see, so it was like 46 years ago, I stumbled across astrology. And it was like fate, like meeting a person, a karmic relationship where you obsess. At least I did. I obsessed with astrology when I was 29 years old. It became the other woman, as it were. I ate, drank, slept astrology. I couldn't find enough books. I couldn't, back in the 70s, you see, astrology was a lot bigger than it ever got to be. It was like at its height, and everybody was investigating. There were many authors and lecturers that were astrologers and shared their information in written form for the most part. For the first time, it was publicly available. How you draw up a chart. What does moon signify? What does Taurus mean? What does that experience mean? And so I absorbed as much of that information. They say that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And within like 3 months of taking my first class in 1975, my astrology friend, Ray Merriman, back then, had a wonderful lady from California come in, and for about 15 or 20 of us, she gave lectures on astrology in Ray's basement. The key part was that during that time, during the week, each one of us that participated got to have her analyze our chart, put the chart on this big thing, whatever they used back then, the overhead projector, I think it was. And then she clicked off, well, Danny, da 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 da, and I was blown away. So much so that I knew at that moment that I wanted to be that person or a kind of person that did that kind of work where she just takes this chart and read the story. She said, I'd like to know what happened to you when you were 8 years old. It's like, wow, out of all the things she could have asked about, bingo. So with astrology, I do the same thing when I do a reading. It's like, first of all, I look back into the past and I see where major patterns and uh, significant experiences happened that altered the life somehow or created a glitch in your programming, as I like to say, that in the future becomes the source of unconscious behavior patterns. And I thought, well, if they're unconscious and the person doesn't know where they're coming from, it'd be a good thing to tell them about that in the auspices of doing astrology. So I that became a part of my work. And so I got adept at, in 46 years, you get good at whatever you do. Whether it's flipping burgers or whatever, you get real good at it. And it becomes automatic. And more of your intuition becomes a part of it. And so what I got good at was reading these stories that were embedded symbolically in the astrology of the birth chart. So I think for me, the more imaginative I could be, the more information I could suggest about the life. But then again, I knew growing up and into these years that everything that I imagined wasn't true. But I had to kind of commit myself to programming myself to only allow legitimate stuff to come through as best as I could uh, gauge my unconscious to only allow that stuff to come through. That's kind of confusing, but yeah, you uh, the mornings of meditation for years and years and years, you're programming yourself, and eventually it becomes automatic. But I value my imagination for being the vehicle through which all this comes through. And because people don't really typically value their imagination, that this is I want to get this point across that how one there's no guarantee that it's true. So it becomes a part of my faith, my belief in whatever's coming through is from source, is divine word, however you want to call it. And how they say you got to get the personality out of the way and let it flow through. Essentially, that's true. So when I do a reading, Danny leaves the room, and whatever my imagination starts reeling, I'm just letting flow.
So it sounds like you're allowing information to kind of channel through as you're reading this astrology chart, which is more of your map on which you go off of. My question now is, how do we know, how is this map that you're following accurate? And what is like the science behind the messages, right? Because you're kind of telling us
Okay,
this channeling.
first, let me answer the first question because I
Mm,
won't get to the second one. How accurate? Okay, so it's a science and it's an art. The art is reading, but the science is the calculation. And there, back in the old days, you used to do it on a hand calculator, degrees to whole numbers to degrees. You had these books that told you where all the planets were every 24 hours. You had the table of to make the houses and stuff. So there is a science to draw up the chart. Number one. Number two, how we access this information is our birth information. So I need your birthday, your birthplace, and the time of birth. The time of birth is critical. I'm searching for a moment, an hour, a minute, a second that'll give me a chart that will time the events of your life. The theory is that there is a moment like that for every one of us. So, how do I get to that moment? Well, first of all, I got to start out with a birth certificate birth time. At least somebody was writing the time down that wasn't related to you, like mom or your sister or whatever, right? So there's the birth. That's what I insist I have to have to begin with. Next, when a person decides to have their chart done and they have a birth certificate time, I got to see if that chart and that time is legit. So we do a correction, and how that works. At the time that I do your chart, besides getting your all your information, birth information, I want to know when, if at all, your parents are, if they're not with us, when did they die? If you ever got married, your marriage date. If you had children, I want your children's complete birth information as well. And then other significant times in your life, like the day the flying saucer came and took you and abducted you, whatever. That's important. So what I do with all those dates is you give me your birth time, I draw up a chart, and then I see if that particular time times those events, those known events in your life. For every 4 minutes that we are in error of the exact moment of birth, that can make as much as a 1 year difference in timing events. So if I see all your events are 6 months off, I can add or subtract 2 minutes from the birth time that you gave me. Okay? And then I draw up a new chart with that correction. And then I see how well does that chart time the events, known events of the past. Now, like I say, after a while, you get really good at this. All right. So more often than not, like 90% of the time, I have a chart before I talk with you. I have a chart that times those events. The only shortcoming is that if you haven't hit 30, if you're not 30 yet, you probably don't have any of those events in your life yet. So it's a little bit difficult and that's why I used to insist that you had to be 30, that you had to go through like a full Saturn cycle, as we say, before I could talk with you. Because before you're 30, yeah, Danny, you're this old guy, and I say that people under 30 haven't been wrong enough. Because before you're 30, you think, I'm right. I don't have experiences where I've been totally wrong. or at least I don't admit to it until I'm 30. And so after I get that information and I correct the chart, then I can the timing that I talk about with you about the future, I feel more confident about because all the stuff in the past lined up. So that's as far as accuracy is concerned. I feel good about having a chart that times all your old stuff when we talk about the new stuff. Now, the thing with astrology is this: it tells you when something's happening. I'm not any good at what. So I can tell you, well, next June, there's all this stuff that seems to indicate this, that, and the other thing. And back when you were 20 years old, that happened when this happened the last time. So that's the kind of information we talk about. We try to look at when's the last time that this was in your astrology timing, and you usually throughout a lifetime these points are linked. When you were 20, you didn't know about this stuff because you didn't have that freedom as a 20-year-old to choose that. But now that you're older and this thing's coming around again, I give you the past dates so that you can reflect on what happened back then in you and to your life to apply to what's happening now. Next question, what was it?
You kind of answered both the questions. The questions were, how is the map accurate? And the second one was, what is the science behind the messages and how they're relating? You kind of did a really good job explaining that. My
Okay.
next question now is, what would you say to someone who says, well, astrology is a pseudoscience?
Well, you got to realize this. Danny went to Michigan State University, majored in microbiology, minored in psychology and chemistry. And people ask me, wow, how can you believe in astrology? you know, um, I guess one of my big purposes is to be that dichotomous person, someone who's brought up in science, and that's what I did for a living as a bacteriologist and a chemist. Um, and so I don't know if that lends any respect to what I say, but I approach the use of astrology scientifically. I came up with this idea of looking back into your past, talking about when these cycles hit. That's using math and science, right? And but I declare, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not psychic, but for 46 years I've been doing this, and it becomes second nature. It's like reading cards. Each card has a story. So whatever my attention falls upon in the astrology, I'll say to you, "Wow, this seems to be coming into me. That this thing is important about you. That you have this gift. That Super Capricorn, once she commits to whatever it is, that there's no stopping you." So.
Awesome. One way that I explain it, because I went on a date once and I was like, yeah, we talked about science. And he's like, oh, that's a pseudoscience. And I was like, that's interesting. I've never had someone approach me and tell me that, but
Oh.
I kind of made an explanation to myself that helped me explain, which was the moon, if it's at a certain place, it has an effect on the earth, the water. So why wouldn't the gravitational pull of Venus
Ah,
or another planet kind of
okay. I suggest this way. God said so. I didn't make the moon to be the symbol. I didn't call Venus Venus or Mars Mars. This was, where did this in? Who called the planets their names and Coincidentally, Mars has to do with aggression, Venus has to do with love. Who thought that shit up? You know what I mean?
And that's the point. The point is that all these planets have an influence. They have an influence on us energetically.
No,
So,
no, 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 no. Symbolically.
okay, symbolically, let's talk about that then. Can you talk
Yeah.
about symbology and maybe the confusion between?
Symbology. Yeah. You know, like the implication is that there's some invisible rays coming from Saturn to make you Saturnian. No, I'd rather say that, well, I don't agree with this energy emanation. I My whole life has been centered on this science of astrology that gives a whole lot of weight for every person, every human being, has a rough time with Saturn. Because Saturn is kind of like the taskmaster in our charts. It ain't gonna let us get away with anything that's bogus. So when it comes around, it usually points to what we're not being real about. Neptune is the complete opposite. We got to be unreal. I mean, there's no connection with it's altered states. And in altered states, however we want to get there, we have a closer connection, or the distance isn't as far when we're in an altered state between us and source. Source is real important. Neptune is all about each person's connection with source. And I'm calling source, I'm defining source as perhaps a place somewhere. It doesn't have to be a place that's, but it's, I figure when I leave my life, where does that energy go to? And I have a hope that it like goes to heaven, or this place where all the reserved life energy accumulates in the embrace of the Creator that people have imagined to call heaven. And that, well, it's, if we could each perceive the profoundness of those statements, how special we are individually as life forms on the planet. That, they ain't found no other human beings so far anywhere else but on this planet. And my question would be like, how do the motions of the planets and their angular relationships with each other, how can that talk about my life or anyone's life? How can that be symbolic? Well, the only answer is the Creator made it so. When the Creator did the Big Bang, and with intention, with creative thought and intention, the Milky Way floated out. I imagine the Creator. I imagine the Creator at the time of the beginning tossing out galaxies like frisbees. Let me put 22 amino acids in that galaxy. Let me try 23 over here. And let me make that galaxy purple. Whatever. See what happens. It's God's or the Creator's way or will. That I don't know why. And am I imagining all this? What we're talking about? Is this just, 76 years on the planet and I came up with this idea that this will explain it? So, rich in these experiences in my life, I'm like my Mother Teresa, Sister Teresa. I still have questions. that plagued my faith, like these last 4 years. That's been the Trumpian years were a test on everybody's faith, a test of faith. How many psychics jumped out the window? This ain't supposed to happen, man. He was supposed to lose.
Mhm.
Okay, so this experience every day for 4 years, we're questioning what the fuck. Sorry.
What
And
about, go ahead.
so yeah, test of faith.
Could you clarify again the difference between the symbology and like kind of like energetic? Because I guess for the longest time I had the confusion that the planets had like an energetic effect on us, but you're saying it's more of a symbology. So could you
Yeah,
clarify the difference between
I can prove it.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
can prove. Okay, so in your chart, you got those planets. And I'm saying symbolically, each one of these is saying this, that, and the other thing. I can do that for every person I can talk with if I have the chart. What I can't prove as easy, or what I can prove, is that scientifically, there's no invisible rays coming from each one of these planets that has a direct effect on my life. It's more about that exact moment at which I was born and the map or the picture, the symbology of how the planets were arranged in the solar system at that moment, as viewed from the place I was born, looking east. So somehow the Arabians or the Egyptians, somebody gave them this information. Hey, the spring is really important, and so is the summer and the solstice and all that. And so they erected these stone pillars to show where the sun was going to be rising through the aperture on the first day of the summer. I imagine ancient civilizations, being more agriculture, had to know when winter was coming and stuff. So they applied that. That kind of information became important. The personality astrology that I'm talking about today, that we have today, is something that has developed for the last couple thousand years, because like I want to say that 2,000 years ago, the individual was nothing, was part of I'm a pyramid builder or whatever, or I'm an invader. I'm going to invade the tribe next to me. Whereas today, we all have these fantastic imaginative illusions. Hey, I'm something. I'm an individual. I am somebody, as they say. Yeah, so that this idea of the individual has evolved. I don't know where it's going. I like to say this. I was just saying this yesterday. They used to say, as I recall, that we use 3% of our brain. Ever hear that? 3 to 5%. And that leaves 95%. I'm going to call it the unconscious. 3% to 5% consciously applied intelligence. And that leaves 95% to the unconscious. Imagine a 767 jumbo jet. Okay? Let's call that the consciousness in total. Now, imagine running up and down the aisle inside that jet. I see a little white mouse with a captain's hat on. That's the conscious who thinks he's running the whole ship. You got 3%, 97%. Who's going to win out? So the unconscious, all that is where our connections to source, all of our experiences, the control of me breathing and the blood flowing and all that, that's all unconscious. So, and the unconscious is associated with the imagination and source and all that. So, we're not equipped to know, to have that direct shot with source, I guess, yet. As we've developed over the last 2,000 years into the importance of the individual, maybe another 2,000 years, if we're so lucky, bring out something else.
Awesome. So I kind of want to move now to the category of like popular astrology questions, right? So
Sure.
what is the symbology or influence of like planets? So like new moons, full moons are a big thing. People try to predict marriages through like their house of, Venus or whatever. Tell me like how these new moons and these planets influence us a little bit. Can you do that?
Okay, so I like to talk about marriage because everybody wants to know if they're going to get married and when and all that. Astrology seems to be more concerned with the first marriage. Why? Because we don't know what we're doing the first time. After that, the second, third, fourth, and fifth marriages, they're not as significant as the first. Because, like I'm saying, the chart will suggest when a marriage will occur. Isn't that? I thought that's kind of interesting too, that marriages and deaths are in everybody's life. How could God make marriages so important? I can see the importance of deaths, you know, and birth and birth, death, marriages, basic three. Not everybody becomes a doctor. Not everybody can swim, but everybody wants to get married and will die and we're born. Oh, how were you asking the question?
So my question is, how does the like new
Oh,
moon, how does the moon influence us, or the symbology of these things affect us or influence our lives?
yeah. If okay, so we used to call it, if the chart, the birth chart, promises a marriage. In other words, how the chart looks when you're born. Is it possible? And then the timing eventually comes around to when it's supposed to happen, if it's going to happen. That's how I see it. It's not, I didn't make it up, but the creator made it a part of your story, the marriage part. New moons and full moons. Well, the moon is so special because not like any other planet, all the other planets are far away, whereas we have this constant connection with moon. And why it is suggested in astrology that the sun represents uh, your identity that everybody sees. It's who you are wanting to be and who you become. But the moon, because of its close proximity to the earth, is like the emotional part of us. It's the inner part. Somebody said the sun is the way you behave to the world, and the moon is how you feel about it. And where that comes from, the sun usually represents the father, the moon usually represents the mother, and in for the most part in history, the man, you know, is getting most of the airplay, getting more of the spotlight, and moms are passive and in the background and nurturing and caring for the children and stuff in the family. Um, That's the sun and the moon. And so new moons and full moons. New moons have traditionally been a symbol of beginnings, whether it's a new moon every month, every time you have a progressed new moon, that could symbolize a year of new beginnings where you're starting out stuff. And full moons are the culmination symbolically of things. So that when you have a full moon progress, like something in your life that you've been building up towards is coming to a conclusion. That could be any kind of conclusion, from maybe somebody out of your life to achieving something big time in life. Yes, especially for physical Earth, new moons and full moons are important. For instance, you got to know what phase the moon is in when you put your plants in the ground. I've no, this is the truth. I couldn't believe it. If somebody told me this before, I said no. But I had several people in my family who were farmers, and the deal was you had to know what sign the moon was in, what phase the moon was in, before you sunk a wooden post into the ground. Because if you did it in the rock, listen to this, if you did it in a bad sign or in a bad phase, that wooden post would come out of the ground. That doesn't make no sense to me, right? Not scientifically, but the fact is that it's something happens sometimes where the posts don't stay in the ground. Also, transplanting and growing your plants and putting them in the ground. A lot of calendars and almanacs will have that. This is good for fishing. This is good for planting and so on. So a lot of people, especially farmers, that's important stuff. Now, the moon, because it's so close, yeah, it has an effect on gravitation, on the tides and the and all that. So uh, the moon is special in that way. The phases of the moon and the new moon and full moon. We don't have that with the other planets, so it's kind of hard to. It's two different things. I hope I've explained that there's no the moon has an effect on the gravitational pull of things on the planet. And so one can say, yeah, that has an effect on, I don't know if you want to call it invisible rays, but gravitation.
Yeah, it definitely has an effect on gravitation. So I understand that.
So in that
Um,
way,
yeah,
I want to stay away from theory. I can only, I'd rather say I can prove this,
right.
or we can see that.
So
Also, for when people would say, approach me about the pseudoscience of the whole thing, all sides, if I got tired of them being in my ear, I'd say, let me have your birth time. Okay, let me talk with you for 2 hours, and if you feel the same way, whatever you need to say or do to me, fine, but listen to me out. So this thing about psychic, because yeah, a good part of my life I've been accused of it, but I say no, but it isn't. Every person has their own definition of psychic, just like every person has their own idea about what an astrologer does. And every time, that's why at the beginning I state, this is what I do. This is what I can do for you. This is what I can read for you. Okay. And if you're
mhm,
cool with that, we got a place. But most, it's happened where people have a preconceived notion of what that's going to be like, or what I can do, or what I will say. And that's why for all metaphysicians, I say this: get yourself a playlist, or a declaration of purpose, as some people call it, but I usually take 15 minutes or so. I'll tell the person, let me have 15 minutes of your time, and I'll explain what I do with astrology. And this way, at least I can state, I can offer what I can do, but it'll take away from whatever expectation the person have. And if they still want to do it, they have that choice.
I'm gonna have two questions here that I kind of want to wrap up with, and that kind of comes down to if you could, like you just said, give me like concrete stuff that astrology can do and that is proven, what would you say those things are?
Well, okay. What, imagine having access to a lifetime, any person's, and say like they lived 70, 80 years. It's a lot of stuff. So what I had to do was to, appreciate that at the beginning, and then try to filter out and try to filter out and to bring to consciousness the ideas that I felt were important in a lifetime. I had a lot of psychology in school. So essentially, astrology is psychology with symbols. Because when aspects are not in agreement with each other, we say there's a conflict between this part of the personality and that part of the personality. You learn this from mom and this from dad. So it makes firm pictures for the person, for the individual, for that individual. My hope is that I will be so keenly accurate that it blows people away. And that awness goes, it makes them feel like, wow, he's talking about something. He's really saying stuff. Oh my God, how did he know that? Because we go into the past and I suggest, yeah, when you were 5 years old, in June, this is when it was most likely that you took on this quality in your behavior. And usually, 80% of the time, the individual consciously remembers something happening at that time. 20% don't. This always surprises me. I've never had a client who was able to take the information and go into therapy, and the therapist would accept it. I've never had that where the therapist said, no, no, we don't do that here. They listen, and then they help the person work it out. I oftentimes suggest to the client, when they say, well, what can I do? And I say, well, there's therapy. Take this information to therapy. Search out a therapist that you can hire and say to them, I went to this astrologer and he tells me I have a conflict between my A and my B. I want to hire you to help me resolve this issue. Here's the key point. I'm going to suggest, I do suggest to everybody that when we resolve our issues, when we meet the quality of the fine print in the karma, that we gain conscious control of our gifts and talents. So I'm suggesting that once I accepted that what I'm getting out of my readings is from my imagination, but I believe it's my gift from God and it connects me with source, and I freely just let it roll without thinking about what I'm going to say the next moment, in the belief that, source is just supplying me through my imagination of what needs to be said. And that way I'm used as the vessel, as the tool from what I perceive as the source, and I can do the work. I'm about my father's business. most importantly, is the belief, your faith, my faith, that this person that you've just experienced for the last 30 minutes is the person that God wants me to be. I believe that. I have accepted that. And so I don't have to think consciously anymore about what I'm going to do or say. I just let it flow. I just be.
I love that. Thank you for visiting us,
My
participating,
pleasure.
and sharing your story. Are there any last little remarks that you want to make?
More than anything else, one becomes totally aware of the importance of our life. And I enjoy this. I want, oh, so when when you get the information about what your birth chart is suggesting about your life, you have a choice from that point on to either accept that information and consciously apply, try to use the information consciously in your life. You know, if I've been a doctor and my chart says you ought to be baking biscuits, and halfway through my life, I just say, I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm gonna, as crazy as it might sound, I'm going to start making biscuits. And as soon as I do, this thing comes into my life. I suggest to you that is called happiness. Because my soul is connected with the story, and Danny, the personality, starts consciously trying to be that, the soul says, yes, that's what I'm here for. And then you become this energy, this whatever you want to call it. And it gives what, security? No, not yeah, there's a security in knowing, I guess that's my word, in knowing that it's possible that this is what God has me here to be.
Or like
And
confidence?
yes, confidence. And then the more you do it, and the more of your life cumulatively becomes a part of this happiness realm. Hey, I don't care who, I know I don't want to go yet. Okay, I got a finite number of Christmases left at 76. It ain't like I'm 26, but a whole bunch of them. And so, yeah, I'm really conscious about all this. That's what happens. And so, taking advantage of today and this opportunity with Neptune on my sun to talk to you about these things, that's fulfilling a purpose. And I'm consciously choosing to do it. And who knows? Maybe this weekend I'll win 50 grand.
Never know. But you're setting a great example and kind of you're setting the example of following, and listening.
Well, it's worse than that.
Uh,
I had no idea. This is applied. But most of the time, I'm just, oh, you stumble into it.
yeah.
I stumbled into this. I didn't plan it.
Mm-hmm.
Always in the back of my mind growing up the first 30 years, yeah, I thought, well, astrology would be cool, but I never got into it. And the first book, one of the girls that at the hospital brought in this paperback book of astrology signs, and you could figure out where your moon was, and they talk about that. And the girl said, Danny, your sun and moon are in Pisces. You ought to be doing this. And within a month, a class opened up here locally in night school, how to draw up a chart. The rest is karma. The rest is history.
Awesome. That's so special. And thanks for sharing, Danny. For the listeners, make sure you follow. If you want to meet with Danny or get a new reading done, I will leave his link. If you're open to doing more readings, Danny, I'll leave your information in the
Hey,
subscription box below.
I'm on Facebook, Danny Hidalgo. We can talk. I got a lot of time to talk, babe.
All right.
All right.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.